Hi, all. I'm Dan Smigrod, founder of the We Get Around Network Forum. Today is Wednesday, November 11th, 2020, and you're watching WGAN TV live at 5. We have an awesome show for you today. We're going to do the top 10 Matterport Pro camera repairs, uh, what kind of problems you might get, how to avoid getting them, what kind of problem it might be, how to fix that problem, and if you can't fix it, how to send it off and get it fixed and what that might cost you. Our guest today is Matterfix founder, Mike Vorse. Hey, Mike, good to see you again.
Hey, Dan. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for being on the show. Mike, before we dive into this list of the top 10 Matterport Pro camera repairs, how about just giving us some context about you, your company, Matterfix, as it relates to your expertise on this topic?
Okay, Dan. I kind of got into the Matterfix business accidentally or, by circumstance. We've been Matterport service providers for a few years now. And probably about a year ago, I had your typical camera fall accident where one of the tripod legs wasn't tight enough and the camera fell over and the top popped off, and so voila, no Wi-Fi. And with my background in another business I was in, repairing mobile devices and computers and that, I thought, well, okay, I'll just go ahead and fix it, and did some research and found the part and got it fixed and realized that it wasn't that difficult. And got into the Matterport camera a little bit and realized it's pretty well built, and most of the parts can be changed out or replaced if there's damage to them. And then after that, it kind of gradually grew. I would fix cameras when I'd see somebody post on a forum, or people that we do business with knew that I'd fixed our camera, and they say, "Hey, can you fix ours?" And one thing led to another, and I've probably done now probably 40 cameras, maybe better, different repairs, anything from battery replacements to Wi-Fi, GPS, rotator motors and such as that. And I realized that Matterport is a great product and the camera's well built, but they're a big company, and I think a lot of times that doing service work probably is a little bit more of a pain for them. And some people have experienced delays in that and getting their cameras back. And being in the Matterport service provider business, I recognize how important it is. If you're on a job or you've got a job coming up and your camera's out of commission, you need to get it fixed now, not 2 weeks from now or somewhere down the road. So with that in mind, we try and get all our repairs done the next day after we receive the camera, if it's a common repair, and get it back to the customer so they're back scanning. So that's kind of the short version of how I got here. I had quite a bit of experience, me and my business partner, in repairing anything from laptops and iPhones and iPads and that over the years. So all the repairs that we run across the Matterport cameras have been pretty straightforward for us. And
Cool.
we do them fast, and we give a good warranty, and help people out if they don't need to send the camera in. If we can help them take care of an issue without doing that, we're happy to do that too.
And we might do that on the show today as we talk about some of the problems, the top 10 problems of a Matterport Pro camera that might need repair,
Yep.
to help people understand, oh, here's how you can prevent that problem. Oh, here's what that problem is. Here's how you can fix that problem. Or, oh, that's one of those problems you got to send off and fix. Mike, I'm going to go through this list of 10 and ask you to comment on each of them. But I do want to let our audience know that we're going to kind of do a bonus thing of 3 additional mini topics on today's show after this list. First, Matterport will stop supporting the Matterport Pro 1 camera starting January 31st in some very specific repairs. I'll talk more about that and then talk to Mike a little bit about where he fits in there with Matterfix. Second is Mike has offered to give tips on buying a used Matterport camera, if you're planning to buy a used Matterport camera, some of the questions that you'll really want to ask in your purchase from the potential seller. And the third is we'll have a special offer from We Get Around Network to receive a free WGAN TV Training Academy membership for 12 months when you do a $250 or more repair with MatterFix. So that's MatterFix, MatterFix.io. That's Mike's website. Mike, so let's jump into the top 10. Damage Wi-Fi and or GPS antenna. What does that mean?
Well, that's by far the most common. You could probably see one or two posts on social media a week about, oh, I dropped my camera and the top popped off and the cable. Typically what happens is a camera falls over and it's enough of an impact that it jars the top loose, and the Wi-Fi, the physical Wi-Fi antenna itself is attached to the top. In fact, I think I've got the top here. You can see here, here's the top, this is the outside, here's the inside, here's the Wi-Fi, this is the actual Wi-Fi antenna, and then the cable runs down here, runs through the middle, and connects to the main board on the camera. What happens is the top pops off, and invariably the cable stays attached to the main board, but it breaks loose typically here. So the antenna's there and the wire comes loose. Sometimes you can, if you're really good at soldering, you can resolder that there, but that's pretty delicate work. But that's the most common problem you see.
Is the GPS unit on that top as well?
No, the GPS unit is attached to the top frame of the camera. So very seldom do you have an issue with the GPS antenna becoming detached. What typically can happen with the GPS antenna runs kind of parallel to the Wi-Fi antenna here, and it goes over and it's attached. The GPS antenna itself is attached to the top of the camera metal housing. The cable runs here right beside the Wi-Fi antenna and attaches. So when the top pops off, the GPS antenna is usually fine. But what can happen, the second way that the Wi-Fi antennas get damaged is the camera falls over and takes a hard impact on the side here where the cable runs under the housing. And if it's a hard enough impact, the metal housing will pinch against the plastic outside housing where the cables run, and it'll damage those cables. So the symptoms of that might be, yeah, my Wi-Fi connects and it seems okay, but I can't get as far away as I used to, or it's taking a long time for my scans to transfer from the camera over to the iPad. So, the cable's there and it's still attached and it's kind of functioning, but it's damaged. And that can happen. It could be, you can look at the camera itself and it doesn't look damaged at all. It took a fall, or maybe you didn't even know it. Maybe one of your techs had it out and it fell. You look at the camera, it looks fine, but inside it took a fall and those cables got pinched between the metal frame and the housing and damaged. And you take the camera apart right away, you can see that. I've had a number of instances where that happens.
Is it typically always triggered by a fall, or is it possible for it to just fail?
I've never seen one fail.
Okay, so in all likelihood, the problem is you dropped the camera, or one of your team members dropped the camera. Even if you thought you could pop the top back on, even if you thought you could put the Wi-Fi antenna back in place, it still may not be repaired to function fully as you would expect.
Yeah, occasionally the cable will pop off of the board and not be damaged, and you can take the back of the camera off and reattach the Wi-Fi cable back and be fine. But usually what's happened is the cable's pulled off of the actual antenna. It's pulled apart. Now another thing that can happen is the top can pop off, and instead of the cable breaking, it actually pulls the connector off of the main board where it connects to the Wi-Fi chip. And that's a more expensive problem because that's super fine micro soldering. You have to reattach the connector to the Wi-Fi chip and then put everything back together. But I've only seen one or two cases where that has happened. The most common problem is either the top pops off and the cable breaks, or the camera's been dropped. It doesn't look like anything's happened, but the cable's been pinched inside the housing and is damaged and isn't fully functional.
So let's assume that it's the light version of the damaging the Wi-Fi and or the GPS antenna. What would Matter Fix charge for a light repair related to the damaged Wi-Fi or GPS antenna? That's assuming the thing snapped off and the antenna needs to be reattached correctly to the top plate.
Okay. Yeah, I want to mention too, I think we discussed this earlier. I'm still working on our pricing with a supplier. We're going to get some really good parts. So the prices I'm quoting now are what we currently have on the website. They are our current prices, but they may change based on what arrangements I make with the parts suppliers. But if you look at our website, matterfix.io, the current pricing will always be there. So currently, if you send in a camera for a Wi-Fi antenna replacement, it's $150 if that's what it needs. But that also includes disassembling the camera. Typically, when cameras drop, things get shifted around. The housing, gets out of alignment, and that typically includes taking anything that needs to be taken apart and putting it back together correctly so everything's seated correctly and fits correctly, and replacing the antenna and a 1-year warranty. That's $150. The same thing for the GPS antenna. It's a little more expensive because the part is more expensive and it's also soldered onto the frame, and that's $200 currently.
Okay, so I called that top 10. I said both damaged Wi-Fi or GPS. That's actually two different problems.
Yeah, typically we don't see many. I have only replaced probably 2 or 3 GPS antennas since I've been doing the repairs. That's not a very common item to get damaged.
All right. Mike, could you tilt your camera down just a little bit so we can see
Sure.
more of you? That'd be great. I think you got it. I think you nailed it right there.
There?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's great. Thank you. Top 10 Matterport Pro camera repair, whether it's a Pro 1, Pro 2, Pro 2 Lite camera. Housing damage. What is the housing and how might it get damaged?
The most likely cause for the housing to get damaged, once again, is the fall.
Is this my housing?
Yeah, that's the housing. It takes I've seen them take a really hard impact and the back case actually pops off, or the front of the housing surrounding the cameras and that pops off in addition to the top popping off. The housings can crack. Some of the the seats where the screws go through and hold it to the frame, those can break loose in a hard impact. And it's hard to put an exact price on that because it depends on, sometimes even though the housing may have a crack or something in it, it can be repaired just with a good epoxy and be back to perfectly working condition. Occasionally, housing parts will have to be replaced, and that varies. It can run anywhere from 150 to I say 400 here if you needed a whole housing for a brand new camera. It could be as high as that. I have not seen a lot of housing damage. Most of the stuff what I've seen has been fairly minor.
That seems like to have a major problem. I'm not even trying to understand. If I have my camera on a tripod, it's 5 feet, 5.5 feet high, maybe I'm on a tile floor, I've kicked out one of my legs by accident, and boom, it goes over. Is that going to be hard enough to destroy the
It could be. I mean, your worst case is probably taking a tumble down the stairs or over a balcony. Somehow maybe it's not in a case and it falls out of a vehicle, or you just never know. There's all kinds of.
We should have done some reenactments here.
Yeah, not with my
cameras. The cameras that you've repaired, have the Matterport's owners told you that it went down the stairs, it went over the balcony, it dropped out of the car while I was driving?
Yeah, pretty much they do. I have a few of them who that their employees have damaged the camera, so they're telling me the employee told them this, and you look at the camera and it's like, well, it was more than that, you know. So you don't always get the straight scoop on what happened.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So if I have a light damage, I'm guessing, is there at some point to say, well, the camera's working, the exterior is a little bit blemished, beat up a little bit, but it's intact. So do I need to still have it serviced?
Yeah, there's a chance you don't. I mean, if you're concerned about the camera, you know, we can go through it, and typically with the ones that have been damaged or that you think there's housing damage, you basically disassemble it, put everything back together correctly. If there's some cracks or something, you epoxy them, put it all back together, and then fully test it. You know, make sure the Wi-Fi signal is good, make sure that it scans right, make sure the motor's not making any unusual noises, completes the scans, no sensor errors and that. And if that's the case, then and it's just cosmetic damage, we never suggest replacing something unless it, absolutely has to be replaced.
So what do you charge for that kind of check if you didn't have to replace the housing, but you still made sure everything was calibrated, attached, fixed, screws might have been needed to be replaced?
That runs anywhere, typically 150, maybe 200 if we really, it depends how far we have to break the camera down. If we have to totally disassemble it all the way down to the stepper motor and the gear drive, it takes a little longer. That might be 200. But typically, it's going to be 150, sometimes even less than that. If it's, if we look at it and we evaluate it, it seems minor, we do a few things to it, put it back together and test it, and it's fine, it's going to be less than that. Those are things that are hard to put a definite price on, but I'd say typically, 200 or less.
Okay, so for current pricing, go to matterfix.io. Top 10 Matterport Pro camera repair battery issues. What does that mean?
That should probably be number one. Battery issues are, here's the infamous Matterport battery. It's a 4S lithium ion battery pack, puts out, when it's fully charged, like I think 14.6 volts. It's really a very quality battery pack that they've designed. But invariably what happens is people have multiple cameras and they set one of the cameras aside and forget to charge it. And like all lithium ion packs, they have a safety feature. And if they get down below a certain voltage, the management board will say, hey, you've gotten too low. It cuts it off and won't let it charge. So what you'll see is in your Matterport camera, either none of the batteries were charged, or in the Pro 1 and Pro 2, you have two batteries. They may go up to 50% and then not charge any more than 50%, which means one of the batteries is not charging. You'll plug it in, it'll show you the charging symbol, the little charging bolt for a couple seconds, and blink the slow blink like it's charging, but then within 10-15 seconds it goes to the fast blink and the charging bolt goes away. And what that's telling you is that the safety features kicked on and it's not going to let the charger charge the battery.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is the first problem that a Matterport Pro would notice is everything looks cool, that the battery is being charged. There's every indication. I'm looking at my battery light. I have it turned off at the moment, but if I look at my battery, I can see it looks like it's charging. But then I go to use the camera and it has not taken the charge. The camera is dead.
No, it won't look like it's charging. If you look at it, it may act like it's charging normally for a few seconds, but typically it'll go to the fast blinking light and it won't be charging. You push the button, there's no charging bolt.
Well, so this is my Matterport Pro 1 camera. Gee, I thought I turned it on. It says battery life remaining 5.5 hours. Is that, I guess you can't see it there when I.
No, that's normal. It's when you plug the charger in that you're going to see the issue.
So if it says 5.5 hours, then I'm good to go. That's not going to be misleading.
No, that's not going to be misleading.
Okay. So when do I know that it's not charging?
When you plug it into the charger and the charging bolt doesn't show, or after a few seconds it goes away, and instead of doing the slow blue blink for charging, it does kind of a rapid double blink, and you'll know there. You push the button, you look at it. There, that little charging bolt that shows when it's charging is not there.
So batteries have failed. What's the solution?
Um, Either there's some fixes you can do on the we can do on the Pro 2 and the Pro 2 Lite, or so they can possibly be repaired and get to where they can be recognized by the charger, or they have to be replaced. The Pro 1, we currently the only way we have to fix those battery packs if they've gotten too low is to replace them.
Mhm. And how much?
Yeah, the battery packs it's 250 for one battery pack, and it's 350 if you have two battery packs that need to be replaced. So it's 250 for the first one. It's an extra 100 if you have if both battery packs need to be replaced.
Okay. And when you open the camera and you do this replacement, is Matterfix also doing some kind of check on the inside to make sure things are connected tightly? There's nothing loose.
Yeah. Typically, anytime we go into a camera, we're gonna check all the connections, all the cable connections, the screws. Make sure the housing. A lot of times when a camera takes a fall, even though you don't notice anything, some of the front housing, the screws on the side have come loose and it shifts a little bit. So we kind of check everything, reseat it all, and put it back together, correctly while we're in there.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I've had my Matterport Pro 2, my Matterport Pro 1 3D camera since July 2014. It charges fine, not have had any problems. So how do you avoid this problem? So this sounds like a problem that can actually be prevented. Here's why the batteries will fail.
It can definitely be prevented. Charge your camera up every couple months. Put it on a calendar. Do something. Put a reminder. On one of your apps, and just take it out. Charge it up every couple months. You'll be fine. You
Is
can
that all it
sometimes
needs? Is every couple of months? It's not once a week, once a month. It's literally every couple of months, and you're cool.
every couple months are fine. You can actually go longer, but to be safe, I suggest every 3 months at most, but 2 months. As long as you've charged it fully, you can let it sit for several months, but
Okay.
don't go too long.
I imagine this comes up where a company has more than one camera. Perhaps Matterport Pro 1 camera is the backup spare camera. It's not going out in the field, and all of a sudden it's been sitting on the shelf for 3 months, and boom, the batteries fail, and now you're missing a backup camera because you don't have the backup.
I have three Pro ones now that I think that's the situation. They have Pro twos, and I think the Pro ones were backups, and they sat for too long, and now it's battery issues in every one of them.
Okay, this is super helpful because this is advice this is actionable advice, so that you don't have to pay Matterfix to put some new batteries in.
Yep.
Uh, uh, Top 10 Matterport Pro camera repairs. Number 4, board level component damage. What is a board level component damage? What's a board?
Yeah. Well, board would be the main. That's the brains. It's like the motherboard in a computer. It's the brains of the Matterport camera. Here's a Pro 2 Lite board. I don't know if you can see here. This is where the sensors, the camera sensor assemblies plug in. On the flip side here, what do we have? You got the Wi-Fi chip. Yep. No, you have the Wi-Fi chip here, the GPS chip. So one of the main things that can happen, one of the most common, we've seen it a couple times, is like I was saying, the camera falls over, the top pops off, the Wi-Fi cable pulls, and instead of coming apart, it actually pulls there's a very small connector in the corner that the Wi-Fi cable plugs into. It snaps that connector off, and that's a very meticulous. The part is probably maybe a 16th of an inch wide, and you have to solder it in just correctly. So that would, that's a micro soldering or board level repair. We've also seen there's a ribbon cable that goes up to the digital readout that reads the charge level and all that in the camera, and it's on the board right here. A ribbon cable plugs in there. I've seen cameras damaged enough where they came apart and that ribbon cable connector got pulled off of the board. So that's another one that's a board level repair that's pretty high on the difficulty scale, and those can get fairly expensive just because of the time that's involved in doing them and testing and that.
So if you take care of your camera, it's unlikely you're going to have a problem with this board.
Yeah, we've probably only done four maybe board level repairs and of all the stuff I've done.
But when you have a board level repair, it literally means that the camera's gone down the stairs, it's fallen, it's
Yeah, the other thing that can cause that is the person that kind of gets a little over ambitious and gets into the camera themselves when maybe they shouldn't have, and tries to do some things and damages a component. That's another way that you can get into a board level repair. And those we can't promise as quick a turnaround because we never know. It can take longer to diagnose those problems, and sometimes the parts have to be special ordered and that. So, it could be relatively quick to get that done, or it could take a couple weeks, depending on what's damaged and how difficult it is to get the part.
part of what I think I'm hearing is if the ribbon has pulled out, it may be just as simple, put the ribbon back in as long as the pins haven't been broken.
Yeah, well, as long as the whole connector hasn't, what has happened is instead of the cable pulling out, which you think it would, it pulls the whole connector off of the motherboard, just rips it off, and then that's a very meticulous problem to solve.
How do I know I have this problem?
Well, you'll see. Your camera is most likely going to be in pieces. Um, you know, I don't think it's something that you're not going to know has happened.
We're really talking about some physical damage occurred, some
Yeah.
violent physical damage occurred, and I suppose I might just be able to go like that and hear rattling.
Yeah, yeah, we've had those come in like that before too.
And is that the board? It's
Well, you don't know. It could be a part or screw came loose inside. Sometimes the do-it-yourself repairs we get those in, and there could be all kind of issues.
when someone tries to do it themselves. I think you refer that might be micro soldering. It is it better that they just say, let me send this off to Matterfix, let me send it off to Matterport, rather than attempt to do this? Or, I mean, this is a pretty significant skill level of micro soldering, I would imagine.
Yeah, unless somebody has definite experience in that, I wouldn't recommend doing any soldering repairs. If the camera, the top is popped off, even the Wi-Fi antenna replacement, it's not, if you've got good practical skills and can get the right part and are patient, doing that repair yourself is perfectly doable. But if you don't have the right skill set, or you don't have the tools, you're not mechanically inclined, I would suggest getting somebody else to do the repair. But the Wi-Fi antenna is one of the simplest. In fact, we're thinking about coming up with a kit that we can send out to people with instructions, so that they could, know that they're getting the right part, know they have the right tools, know they have the instructions, and be able to do it themselves rather than have to send the whole camera in for something if it's just a Wi-Fi antenna replacement.
Okay,
Uh,
going back to the board problem, if you do need to do something, is there a price range of what this might cost?
It's pretty wide on the board level. I mean, typically, if we're going to get involved in that, we've got to disassemble the camera down completely to get the board out. And so those repairs start at 300 and typically 300 to 500, depending on what's involved, how complicated it is, how many parts need to be replaced.
Okay. It's a Matterport Pro 1 camera. I've sent it to you. You opened it up. You call me back. You say, Dan, $500, $750 to fix it. I say, no, thank you. Is there a charge for you opening the camera, determining what the problem is?
We never charge for estimates. The customer pays the shipping to us and the shipping back, and they're not obligated to, if it's a thing where we don't know the price ahead of time, or the camera comes into us and it has more damage than they thought it had, there's no obligation to get the camera fixed.
Okay. So, okay, great. Now, I think, I was trying to do this top 10 Matterport Pro camera repairs. I think actually touched on number 5 at the same time, and that's a fail do-it-yourself repair attempt. So it sounds like that's actually a category until itself, is that enough pros have attempted to do a repair of one kind or another that's resulted in a botched fix and have had to send the camera to you for repair.
Yeah, that we've run into a number of those, and the difficult thing about those is you don't always know what's happened. You may get one story, but then, or they may not tell you at all. They tried to do anything, but once you open the camera up and you get inside, you can tell that somebody's been in there that didn't know what they were doing. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean, like I said, the simpler repairs like replacing a Wi-Fi antenna, if somebody has the tools and the patience and the aptitude, that's probably one of the easier, repairs to do. But if you start getting into, the battery replacements and the stepper motor and, some of these other things, I wouldn't advise it unless you have a background in electronics repair. Because if you're not experienced with going into things like that, there's a lot of damage you can do just not even realizing it, and you could wind up basically ruining your camera totally where it's not repairable.
Point taken. Top 10 Matterport Pro camera repairs. Charging port problems. Number 6, charging port problems.
Yeah, I would say probably not problems. I think the main problem I've seen, and it seems to be on some of the newer cameras, is the screws that hold the charging port to the back there. Can you hold your camera up, Dan? And so you can see, raise it up a little bit. There, the charging port there on the bottom. There are screws that attach from the back that hold it in place. And I've noticed on some of the newer cameras, the screws are a little bit small for the holes, and it's been fairly easy for that charging port to get pushed through inside the camera. And obviously then the camera has to be taken apart and it put back in place and put in place with the proper screws. I haven't come up with a specific price for that. If we have to replace that component for some reason, if the cables got broken or somehow it's damaged and needs to be physically repaired, that replacement is $150. If it's pushed through and it just needs to be reattached, that would be a fairly minimal charge. I've only run into that a couple of times yet, and I haven't really set a price for that.
Is the charging port, is it different on the Matterport Pro 2, Pro 2 Lite, Pro 1?
Nope. They're interchangeable.
And so it's something we can't see because I can't see any screws there.
Right.
Yeah. So that's something internal.
Yeah, there's screws that go in the back that attach it to the case from the back.
Any thoughts on why those would fail?
They don't fail. I think it's just I've noticed in the sizing isn't quite right. The screw head is not big enough, or the hole that it goes through is too big, which allows, it doesn't hold it well enough, and if you push hard enough, it can pop off. I've only seen that on, I don't know whether there's a batch of cameras or a couple of cameras. I've seen some posts on forums about that you plug it in and it's loose, and I think that's what the problem is. It's just not well
Ah,
attached.
okay. So you'll know that you got a problem when you go to plug in the charger here, and it's kind of wobbly. It's not. It's just not. No. How
Well,
how do you know
you
you
have a
have this
you have
problem?
a you have a potential problem if it's wobbly. As long as you don't push it too hard, it doesn't get forced. It probably will be okay. As long as you can still plug it in and it charges, you're fine, even if
Fine,
it's wobbly.
but I'll know I have a problem if I can push the charger in too far.
Well, yeah, if it's gone, it'll just fall inside the case and disappear.
Ah, okay. There we go. So you'll know that you have a problem. You go to charge it, and you put your charging cable in, and that little piece there
It's
just
gone.
goes. It goes inside the camera.
Yep, there's just a hole there.
Okay, so we're going to put a name to that charging port problem.
Push through. Yeah.
Push through. Okay, look at that. We just branded a problem for you. Top 10 Matterport Pro camera repairs. Number 7 needs total disassembly, reassembly, and testing. What just happened that's required?
There again, the camera's taken a spill and it's not functioning correctly. You're getting sensor. The spill can cause the camera sensor assembly to get out of alignment. The housing can get shifted. The battery packs can move around inside. There's a number of things that can cause the camera to display a sensor error after taking a spill. And if you tried rebooting it and a few different things like that, and tried reconnecting a few times, and you're still getting it, if the camera sensor assembly has not been damaged, physically damaged, it's likely that the camera can be disassembled, everything detached, put back together correctly, everything seated correctly, and totally reassembled, and then turn it on and it'll function correctly.
Would one of the indicators that I have a problem is that this would rattle?
Yeah, if that's rattling, you're probably having more problems. You maybe even have something broken inside. A lot of times the camera won't rattle. It'll take a spill and it won't rattle, but the Wi-Fi cable has gotten pinched inside, or the the assembly has gotten out of alignment, and you get a sensor error. Those types of issues.
So ultimately, if I go to scan and it works, I'm good.
Yep.
And if something doesn't work, then that might be an indication that fall caused the problem that needs to be repaired.
Yeah. Yeah. Matterport cameras are remarkably well built. I mean, I've seen some that have taken spills, and you would think that oh, this delicate electronics, and it's going to be all damaged in that, and they can take a pretty good spill and keep on working.
Yeah, Mike, I think to Matterport's credit, in the 6.5 years that we've been doing the We Get Around Network Forum, there have only been a handful of problems with the physical part of the camera itself.
Yeah.
And I would say that every sentence either began or ended with, and I dropped the camera. Took
Yeah.
the spill. It fell down. It wasn't like, oh, it just failed. It's truly been there was some violent event that took place regarding the camera. I've never heard of somebody dropping it down the stairs or over the balcony or dropping it spill out of a moving car. I'd love to hear those people tell those stories firsthand. But I think my impression is the Matterport Pro Series cameras have been very well built.
Yeah.
And as long as you take good care of it, you're not going to have a problem. And
Yep.
even the battery problems, which is probably the one that's been most reported in the We Get Around Network forum, that was always either teased out with one more post with, hey, when was the last time you charged the camera? And you get a response, well, it's been in the closet for 6 months. I decided to use it again. And, lo and behold, it didn't work. So top 10 Matterport Pro camera repairs. Number 8, stepper motor and or rotor gearbox? What is a stepper motor and or rotor gearbox?
Well, the stepper motor and the rotator gears are what spin the camera around. There's a motor inside the camera. Probably can't see that very well. You might be able to see it.
Yeah.
This is the stepper motor. It's got threads on it here. When the camera gets ready to do a rotation, the stepper motor runs for a couple seconds while it rotates, then stops. That's why they call it step, because it steps between as it's moving around. And then that fits into here. You can see the bottom. Everybody's familiar with the bottom of the Matterport camera. You've got the mounting, the base plate, this which you can see on the bottom, and then inside the camera, it's attached with this housing here, and you've got a plastic gear in there, plastic tooth gear that the stepper motor is pushed against. So that as the stepper motor turns, it rotates the gear and spins the camera around. And once again, credit to Matterport. This is a very, very well designed, well thought out mechanism, and we don't see problems with this very often. But
How do I know there is a problem?
well, it can manifest itself a couple of different ways. One could be that the camera, the stepper motor has gone out, or maybe you dropped the camera and somehow the stepper motor got disengaged. So it's in there and it turns, but the camera doesn't spin because it's not touching against the gear. So that's one way. The stepper motor can go out, just quit working. You can hear the motor make odd noises. I had a customer who sent a camera in, and the motor was just making a really odd noise, and I think it was probably going to go out at some point in time. So he wanted to go ahead and he wanted to replace both the motor and the rotator gear. So we replaced both of those components. It's not very common that this happens. Like I said, the most common thing probably would be that the set screw that pushes the stepper motor against the gear there comes loose or somehow shifts, and there's not enough pressure being applied, and either the camera won't turn, or it might make a clicking sound like you hear plastic gears clicking together.
What does that sound like?
Like a click 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 click. Just like you would.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yeah,
Could
you
that
heard. Click 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 click. But
Thanks for being on Car Talk. We're with Mike Force.
but that's probably.
What else could it sound like? Is there a different sound for?
Well, a motor can make you're used to the ring 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 sound that you hear when the camera rotates. If that sound significantly changes in pitch, that might indicate that the stepper motor is going out. So if you've used your Matterport camera, you're 100% familiar with how it sounds. If that sound changes significantly, that could be an indication that the stepper motor may be going to fail.
So you don't really need to know what the sound of a stepper motor failing is. You just need to know it doesn't sound like it normally sounds.
Yeah, like, hey, something sounds different with my camera. Then pay attention and see. Now, if it starts to fail to the point where the rotations aren't correct, you're going to notice it because the scan's not going to complete correctly. It's going to give you an error message.
This has tension in it. Should that
Yep.
always have tension?
Yeah, that definitely should have tension.
If that doesn't, loose?
If that doesn't have tension, that means the stepper motor has disengaged from the plastic gear inside there. That's what I was talking about, like the set screw backs off, or the stepper motor gets dislodged or something. If you can turn that with you turn that and there's no resistance at all, then that means that you've got a problem in there.
Which may be either the motor or the rotator or both.
Typically, it's going to be the motor. The motor's not in place, or the motor has been damaged and needs to be replaced.
So how much to replace the stepper motor, how much to replace the rotator gearbox, how much to replace the stepper motor and the rotator gearbox?
Yeah. Well, typically either one of those components, if we do one, it's 300. If we do both of them, it's 500. And there again, that's one of the more complicated repairs because you're disassembling the camera completely. Every screw, everything comes apart and comes out.
And
Taking it down to the bare metal, I guess, as they say.
is there anything to do to prevent this problem? Or is it totally related to the camera's been dropped?
Well, either the camera's been dropped or the stepper motor fails. It's an electronic motor; it could potentially
Has
fail.
that happened? Do you, in some of the repairs that you've done, is it literally just been a part failed?
No, I haven't seen that yet. Like I said at the beginning, it's a pretty well designed, assembly that they did a good job engineering.
I think of the few times that that click 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 sound. Excuse me. Typically, what we've done in the We Get Around Network forum is when somebody has reported that problem, or they reported it as click click click. The first thing we do is to say, could you make a YouTube video so that you could post it back to the forum so we can hear the sound? Mm-hmm. And generally, someone will pipe in and say, oh, well, you have a problem. It needs to be repaired. And I could be mistaken, but I'm almost positive that every time that problem has occurred, and it's only been a few times, that we've said, hey, go back to Matterport, let them know you're hearing this click, click, click sound, that Matterport has taken the camera back and has either repaired it or swapped it. I don't know if it was in warranty or not in warranty. I think there were even times that it was out of warranty, but we're still willing to swap it. And
yeah, in my experience, Matterport's been pretty good with if there's a problem that is in any way, kind of their fault, or could be their fault, or something fails that really shouldn't have failed. It seems like they usually, my experience has been they've done a pretty good job taking care of it, from what I've heard.
Meaning, if you haven't, excuse me, if you haven't dropped the camera and it just fails, that's super rare. And then if you have this, all of a sudden you have this noise problem and it's just out of the blue, I certainly would say it's worth sending an email to Matterport and just ask them that question.
Yep.
Yeah. Maybe they still will handle it as a warranty, even if it's out of warranty. Mm-hmm. Top 10 Matterport Pro camera repairs, number 9, sensor errors. What is a sensor, and what kind of errors do you get?
Well, it's I guess it's called, I don't know the correct 100% term for it. I call it the camera sensor assembly. And basically it's your cameras, you're familiar with this from the front. Here's what it looks like from the back. It's got 3 boards in it, and each board has a camera and an IR light, and then I believe an IR sensor. So that does all of the taking the picture, sending out the IR, and then reading back the 3D dimensional data. And there again, these I've seen cameras take pretty good falls and have no problem whatsoever. But 2 things can happen. One is that assembly can get out of alignment in the camera, and the camera senses that, hey, something's not quite right here, and it can give you an error. And in those cases, a lot of times we can disassemble the camera.
Mike, is the error I see here, or am I going to see it on my iPad?
You're going to see it there on the camera, on the readout.
And what would be a typical error message?
Just as one of the sensor errors.
And it'll literally say sensor error.
Yeah.
And it might be sensor error 43.
It could be hardware fault. It could be hardware error. I've seen most of the time I've seen sensor error. Um,
Okay, so you get a sensor error, your heart drops. Uh, is that even something that's repairable?
Um, yeah, like I said, if it's a question of the something's out of whack, out of alignment in there, a lot of times totally disassembling it, putting it back together correctly can solve that problem. Now, if the camera sensor assembly is physically damaged, like I saw a post on the forum the other day where somebody, you would look at their Matterport model, look at the dollhouse view, and you would see the middle section of walls missing. Well, that meant that the IR sensor that sent out the signal or that received the signal in the center of those three cameras was damaged. Something had happened because that wasn't functioning because everything looked good, but there were holes in the walls where it should have been filled in the dollhouse.
Is that physical damage or is that an alignment issue?
That is physical damage when you see that.
And so how do you know it's a good kind of problem, it's alignment, and that's something that can be repaired
Well,
easily?
you don't know 100%. If you get that error, the camera's taking a spill, and you're getting some type of unusual error, it's very likely that, like I said, that if the lenses aren't damaged, that you can disassemble everything, put it back together, and be fine. But if the camera itself or the sensors are physically damaged, then the whole unit or that camera is going to have to be replaced.
So that could be a catastrophic problem. It's just you're not going to repair the camera because the cost of that assembly is just a good chunk of the cost of the camera.
Yeah, that's one of the things. The only way I can do that right now is using parts off of cameras that I've purchased that have had other damage. But so I base my cost, based on what it costs me to get those parts in. So you're looking at anywhere from $500 to $800. Now I'm working on getting a more direct, being able to more directly source parts, and I don't know what that pricing will be, but I I should be able to get all the parts at some point that I need, and then I'll be able to put in definite prices. If you got a Pro One and you got this, it's going to cost a Pro Two this. Um, but right now it's kind of it varies based on what parts I have on hand and how much I had to pay to get those parts in.
Which probably segues into if you have a camera that is broken and you really can't sell it to anyone else. Are you interested in buying broken? Is
Definitely.
Matterfix?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. If you have a camera that maybe it is repairable, but it's going to cost X dollars, and you're like, I don't know if I want to spend that. We'd definitely be interested in making you an offer on it. We're going to base our offer on what we're going to be able to use, what are good parts that we can use out of the camera. And then if you have a camera that's catastrophic damage, like if the main board on the camera is damaged, you're probably not gonna replace it. I mean, maybe if it's a Pro 2, you might, but it's very likely that if you have board damage and something else, you're not going to replace it. And it's not really worth much because it's not a sellable camera. But we would definitely be interested in making you an offer on it based on what parts in it are good.
So, newsflash: if you have a camera that has failed, you might send it off to Matterfix, no charge to find out how much it would cost to repair. You get your repair number back, find out that that's not the amount of money you want to put into the camera. Ask Mike to make you an offer on buying the damaged camera, and then it maybe have value to Matterfix because there's parts in that camera that can be used in other camera repairs.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
And I think I would add to that is even if your camera's failed, you still might want to get it fixed, even if you're not planning to use it, because it may make sense to repair it in order to be able to sell it, to put it onto eBay or to private WGAN group for buying and selling
Yeah,
Matterport.
there's a pretty active market out there for Matterport cameras. They hold their value. They seem to hold their value pretty well. I mean, it seems like around 1,500 to sometimes 1,800 or so on the Pro ones, and then the Pro twos, over 2,000 most of the time, and sometimes more than that.
So it still may be worth getting the camera fixed so
Yep.
that it can be sold. Gee, I'm gonna come into tips for buying a used Matterport camera in a moment, but I really do want to get through the top 10 Matterport Pro camera repairs. Number 10, camera sensor assembly. Is that different than the sensor error?
Well, it's both. The sensor errors apply to the camera sensor assembly. So we pretty much covered that when we um, when we just talked there.
Okay, the top 10 Matterport Pro camera repairs. Any bonus repair topics?
Um, Taking care of your camera, the obvious things: keep it charged, don't drop it. Don't freak out if you do have a damaged camera. A lot of times it can be taken care of quicker and less money than you might think. And we warranty all our repairs for a year, and we get them turned around for you quick. We fully test them before we send them out. Even if we replace a Wi-Fi antenna, we're going to test the other function before we send it back out and make sure everything's working correctly.
Matterport repairs cameras. Why Matterfix?
Well, I mean, if you're under warranty, if your camera's still under warranty and you have a repair that Matterport is going to, not charge you for, you have to balance how long is it going to take them to do it versus when do I need the camera, how much is the shipping cost, and that you want to weigh all these things out. There's definitely times if it's an expensive repair and your camera is under warranty, you're going to want to try and get it back into Matterport if that's something they're going to cover under warranty. Now, out of warranty, I strongly suggest that we're going to be the best value out there, both in the turnaround time and the pricing. I think we've got a really good offering there, and Matterport does repair work. I don't think they're a big company and they've got a lot going on, and sometimes they don't get to things as quickly as as a technician or a service provider out in the field would like them to. So we kind of we step in and provide the out of warranty repairs and give you a good warranty and get it done and get it back to you quickly.
So I think I heard four things, and I'll add a fifth. The first is turnaround time.
Yep.
Matterfix.io. Matterfix is going to be super fast about turnaround time. Second is the pricing, that Matterfix is going to be competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Third is that Matterfix provides a 1-year warranty on all your work.
Yep.
Four, there's no charge to give you an estimate of what it's going to cost.
Correct. Yep.
5, this is Matterfix is a full-time business for you, so this really matters to you about turning around cameras quickly, developing a great reputation, having people post in the forum, the We Get Around Network forum, to be able to say, hey, I sent my camera to Matterfix. I got it back within a day after they received it. The price was reasonable. They gave me a warranty. Mike was easy to communicate with, gave me a quote, said yes, boom, the work was done.
Yep. That sums it up, Dan. Good.
Well, I would add one more bonus one for We Get Around Network forum members is if you engage Matterfix to do a repair that's $250 or more, then you will receive free 12 months of WGAN TV Training Academy membership. And that it's invaluable in terms of the amount of training materials excuse me, we take every show from WGAN TV live at 5, and it becomes one of the courses. Excuse me. So it's super easy to see all the content. Then we have a lot of content that's been recorded and is only available to WGAN TV Training Academy members. Anyway, you get that if you invest $250 or more getting MatterFix to repair your camera. Mike, I wanted to move on to Matterport has announced that as of January 31st, 2021, they will stop performing the following repair types: most sensor errors, configuration issues, Wi-Fi fault codes, cosmetic repairs, scratches, dents, damage caused by drop camera. If possible, they will continue to service battery issues, Wi-Fi range issues, motor or drivetrain repairs. This changes because they're having trouble sourcing parts. I'm reading from a post in the We Get Around Network forum. If you want to read more, limited Matterport Pro 1 repairs after 31 January 2021 is the headline. So what happens after January? Oh, and I should say, to Matterport's credit, the software will continue to work with Matterport Capture. Has nothing to do with supporting the ability to capture, just has to do with parts. What happens on February 1st, 2021, and my Pro 1 camera is in one of those categories that Matterport no longer supports.
Yeah, we should be able to take care of most any issue that comes up with the Pro 1s going forward. There may be some things we experience with the limitations as far as parts go, but I think that we should be able to, anything that they can't do, we still should be able to. We're going to make every effort to be able to offer those repairs.
Terrific. And I would imagine the only issue would be if you can't get the part. But I think maybe unlike Matterport, you're probably willing to buy a used Matterport camera to salvage parts from one camera that can be used in saving multiple other cameras.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think the good news for Matterport Pro 1 3D camera owners, that if Matterport no longer supports the repair that your camera needs after January 31st, 2021, MatterFix, go to matterfix.io, and Mike hopefully will be able to still take care of you, get your camera repaired and keep you going.
That's our goal.
The Pro 1 is a great camera. There's many clients actually couldn't tell the difference. We photographers, can tell the difference between a Matterport Pro 1 and Pro 2 camera output, but frankly, most clients probably can't tell. So if you're using a Pro 1 camera, you still have a great camera. There just may be some issues with getting it repaired, and the good news is MatterFix can help you with that.
Definitely. Yep.
Mike, that kind of leads us into okay, so I'm interested in buying a used Matterport camera. As I mentioned in the We Get Around Network forum, we have a private group, WGAN private group, for buying, selling used Matterport cameras. There's eBay, there's other forums. So it's probably Craigslist. If I'm interested in buying a Pro camera, can you give me some tips on what I need to look for, what questions I need to ask?
Yeah. The obvious one is, make sure that the battery is fully charged. You want to see it, have them show you a picture of the screen with the battery level 100%. Another thing is, I've seen a lot of people represent cameras as never having been used or very lightly used. But if they show you a picture of the mounting plate on the bottom, if it hasn't been used or has barely been used, it's going to show very little wear. Like mine is showing a medium amount of wear. Dan's, yours is showing a lot of wear.
Uh-oh, uh-oh. Don't
Yeah.
don't tell me that. I want to get top dollar for this at some point.
Yeah. So you can't sell it and tell somebody you never used it.
How can you tell? I mean, there's not much that you see there, just maybe that the paint is removed.
The paint, yeah. See mine versus yours.
Yeah.
You can barely see any. There's a few scuff marks on mine. Yours is worn. But I've seen people list cameras for sale and say they've only used them 3 times, but you look at the plate there and it's all scuffed up, and you can tell that that's been used a lot.
Hey,
Another,
that's two great tips. I heard two. So the first one is you want a picture to show that the battery can accept the full charge 100%.
yep,
Two, you want to be able to look at a picture. If you can't see it in person, you want a picture of the bottom plate so you can, and like, how do you just make some is it literally what we just showed? It was like, it looks like it's been worn, it's used, it's
yeah.
been
Most of the time they're going to show you a picture of the bottom anyway, because they're going to show you the serial number, so you can verify if it's a Pro 1, a Pro 2, or a Pro 2 Lite.
So what can you tell from let me see if I can hold that correctly for you. There's the plate. What is it that you're looking for on that plate?
Well, there's the serial number, and then there's the model number. It's the MC200, which would be a Pro 1. And then there's the serial number if you want to verify it with Matterport that it hasn't been stolen or lost. And then there's looking at the mounting plate to see how much wear there is on it.
And in the serial number, I'm trying to make it out. I think it says B210. Is that tell you anything?
No.
So I would imagine there's a series where there's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, a series.
I haven't been able to determine anything out of the serial numbers. There might be some significance to it.
Okay.
But the model number obviously needs to match what you think you're buying.
Okay, because my camera was actually swapped out for a particular reason, and my original series was an A, and so I'm just imagining that the higher the letter, if that's such a thing, the later the letter, then it's probably a more recent camera. If you're buying my camera and it's a B, it's probably somewhat older.
Mm-hmm.
Is age a problem, or is this like a fine wine? And
I wouldn't necessarily say age. I would say physical condition. How much wear? How scuffed up is it?
Okay, so you want to be able to look. So you're looking at my camera. Other than that plate, do you have any assessment just by staring at my camera?
Well, the lenses, you want to make sure there's no scratches on the lens. Yours look pretty clean from what I can see. With a picture, you could see a lot better.
Okay, so you want to look at the lens to see whether they're scratched or not. So you want a photo that may be taken from a little bit of an angle that might reveal that there's a scratch in the lens.
Yep. And it doesn't hurt to look at the seams where the front and the back, the seams on the side of the camera, they should be even and fairly close together. If they have gaps in there, that could mean that the camera's been dropped or hasn't been put back together correctly. Same thing on that side. The seams should be nice and tight.
Wow, this is crazy. So I'm looking for my serial number. Oh, okay. Again, my serial number is B as in boy 210. And I'll just parenthetically add this, Mike, is I know early in the We Get Around Network forum, about 6.5 years ago, I did get a call from Matterport. There was a camera stolen. And so we essentially agreed to work together that if anyone was advertising in the We Get Around Network forum a camera for sale, that we would always ask them to please take a picture of that bottom plate.
Yeah.
So that the potential buyer could actually check with Matterport support and say, hey, I'm about to buy a camera with the serial number B210, just want to check if it's been lost or stolen. And that Matterport, as far as I know, still maintains that list. I haven't heard anybody talk about a camera being lost or stolen in 6 years, but I think if you're going to spend $1,500 or $2,000 or something more, you might just send off an email to Matterport support, give them the serial number, say, hey, and it may be as easy as saying, hey, I just want to check, is there any issue with having a Matterport cloud account with this particular camera? I imagine that Matterport still maintains a list of perhaps, I'm imagining they still have this list of cameras that have been lost or stolen, so you don't end up buying a stolen camera. So we get around Network Forum. We're trying to do our best of help make Matterport cameras have zero value if it's been stolen.
Yep.
So that we're just trying to help police that. Okay, so what else do I want to look at the camera in order to help determine whether about buying a used Matterport Pro camera?
That pretty well covers it. If you want to go to the next step, I would request that the seller put the camera on a tripod and connect to it and do a spin, and then just with their phone record the video of it spinning around, so that with the sound on, so you can hear, as long as it's, you don't want to hear any unusual noises.
Exactly.
Yep.
Which we've learned is either the stepper motor or the rotator gearbox failing. So you can actually listen with the camera rotating on that video.
Yep.
Okay, good. Anything else for buying a used Matterport Pro camera?
Nothing that comes to mind now. I mean, obviously factor in the fact if you're getting a tripod and you're getting a nice case, the value there. A lot of times I see a camera without any accessories sell for the same price as one that has, comes with a case and comes with a nice Manfrotto tripod. And that's an extra, $300 or so there.
Yeah. All right, cool. Gee, there was a follow-up question I wanted to ask you about buying a used camera. What's the difference between a Pro 2 and a Pro 2 Lite? Is it just battery?
No, it's a different Matterport. I think their original intention with that program was to make a camera that was a little bit cheaper, sell it to maybe realtors and stuff who may not use it as much. So they'd be more likely to buy it because it's cheaper, but that Matterport would charge them more on the processing side of that. So they would sell the camera for less on the front end, but make more each time somebody processed the models.
And that's changed. So Matterport now honors a Matterport Pro 2 Lite just as a Matterport Pro 2. So I'm just trying to understand is if there's something different physically. Does it have one battery instead of two?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yep. Yeah, that's the only difference that I'm aware of. All the components. It's basically a Pro 2 in a different colored housing with one battery instead of two.
Could you put a second battery in there?
I have one. I've put a second battery in mine.
You have a Matterport Pro 2 Lite, and you've added a second battery.
Correct. Yep.
So I think what may be helpful to know in that context is, I've done some very long jobs. I want to say 8 to 10 hours, and the battery lasts. The two batteries that are in a Matterport Pro 1 camera last forever. I think I would give out before the battery gives out. So you take a lunch break, or you plug it in and you charge it. But I imagine if you're trying to do that with you're doing a construction site and you're trying to do that with the Pro 2 Lite, you may have a problem. I don't recall how long the batteries last, but if you wanted to, maybe you could buy a used Pro 2 Lite camera and have Matterfix upgrade it, and then you're like probably an interesting way to maybe solve a problem. Get a camera for a lower price.
I need to. I've put the second battery in mine, but I haven't field tested it enough because I have a regular Pro 2 and I keep forgetting to use the Pro 2 Lite. So far, everything seems to work, 100% on it, but I need to let it run all the way down and charge it back up to be 100% sure on that. But when I get that done, I'll be posting into the forum if that's an option, because that would be, if you have a Pro 2 Lite camera, and your issue is running out of battery space, adding a battery to it, gives you a really solid camera.
Do you need an extra mount inside, or it already has the
Everything's there. It's all ready.
ready? Cool. Mike, we've covered a lot of ground talking about the top 10 Matterport Pro 1, Pro 2, Pro 2 Lite camera repairs. We've covered tips for buying a used Matterport camera. We've talked about the Matterport no longer supporting Pro 1 camera repairs after January 31st, 2021. We talked about the special offer for We Get Around Network Forum members to get a free 12 months of WGA and TV Training Academy membership when they have a repair with you with MatterFix for $250 or more. We talked about the differences between why MatterFix versus Matterport for repairs. On this topic, what haven't I asked you that we should discuss?
It sounds like we pretty well covered it, Dan.
Awesome. Mike, thanks so much for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dan. It's a pleasure. I enjoy talking about repairing Matterport cameras.
Awesome. We've been visiting with Mike Vorse. Mike is the founder of MatterFix. You can find MatterFix on the web at matterfix.io. That's matterfix.io. You can also find Mike in the We Get Around Network forum. His member name is @MatterFix, the @ and then MatterFix @MatterFix. MatterFix and Mike, they're located in Gainesville, Florida. I'm so sorry, we didn't even talk about international repairs. I imagine that as long as they're willing to pay for the shipping to and from Gainesville, Florida,
Yep.
you're good.
Yep, we're good. Some countries, it's prohibitive for the duties, when the cameras go back into the country. But most I've got a couple cameras from Australia right now that I'm working on some issues. And where else have we? I guess everything else has come from the U.S. so far. But yeah, out of the country, wherever, we can get them fixed. And always feel free to reach out to me through the forum or through our website if you just have a question or concern or something like that. I try and stay on top of those channels and get back to people as quickly as possible.
Yeah, awesome. Again, Mike Vorse, founder of MatterFix from Gainesville, Florida. Thank you for being on the show today. I'm Dan Smigrod, founder of the We Get Around Network forum, and you've been watching WGAN TV.